a deck. I don't want to kill people by PowerPoint, but why don't we do, hopefully we can skip stuff if it sounds at all repetitive, because my esteemed colleagues who spoke before me this morning. But I'm going to launch it now. So I'll share my screen and hopefully that'll work. There we go. There we are. There it is. Great. Okay. So this is interesting times, right? And I think one of the things that has been said a lot this morning is just how every day there is some new and unexpected development. I think that's partially due to the fact that this is happening in real time, and it's not a story. It's actually the way that life is actually emerging. And clearly governments and organizations, global organizations, are trying to managing the messaging themselves about, to avoid there being mass panic and, the extremes of behavior that, fear can actually create. But I think right now what we are seeing in some places certainly is that we are beginning to reconnect, if you like, with our humanity. And I also think that with all of this newfound time that we have, perhaps this is also an opportunity for us to revisit our creativity, and also to take the opportunity to, rediscover who we really are. And I think that creators are actually ideally placed to really work with brands who are thinking agile, who are thinking about what comes after COVID-19, and being proactive at this time, I think, is really, really important. So I totally understand there's been a lot of talk this morning by the other panelists about, not being seen to be opportunist, but at the risk of being controversial, and as anyone who knows me will know, that's not a risk as far as I'm concerned. I actually think this is an opportunity in itself for brands to build real, authentic relationships with their consumers. And to do that, I highly recommend, as I'm sure most of my colleagues will as well, that they consider and use influencer marketing as a great way to actually connect. But let's be honest, there is a lot of changes in behavior right now. And one of the biggest ones is, I'm trying to get rid of this, video, because I'm sure you're all seeing, as beautiful as we all are, the slides are being obscured. But anyway, I'll carry on. As we've seen right now, there has been rather a massive increase in social media usage. And I mean, the numbers speak for themselves here on the screen, but also we're seeing enormous growth in engagement. And I think that engagement is actually really the most important part of this message, because when consumers are actually, audiences are engaged, then, they're much more open to understanding and learning messaging. And I think that's where the opportunity for most advertisers and brands actually exists. Turning the tap off completely, I think, is actually a very dangerous thing for brands to do now. It is not the right time to do that. And this is where we've got an example of how they can drive social good, and that's been spoken about a great deal this morning. I think it's interesting what Jane was saying about the trend in messaging. I think this is great, and I think Nike have done it really, really well. Brewdog have done a great job. Pret have activated a really lovely campaign, and I think that is great. But a trend in messaging can also start to become quite irritating. And you have to be really careful if you're a brand to make sure that you're keeping yourself fresh And that's also a challenge for brands because, you know, that brand activation, you know, traditionally there would have been an overarching paradigm, and we would have then activated, you know, beneath that paradigm or above that paradigm. And, you know, our messaging would have been driven by the overall, you know, values that the brand wanted to represent. At times like this, we've got to be very careful, I think, that we do not land up being just copycats. And because that's where I think the risk lies for brands and advertisers, and that is where the strength of influencers and creators is really, really powerful, because they have their own original spin that they can take on the brief, and you don't seem, and you're not going to look like a copycat brand trying to be the good guys out there. That's got to be very careful that you don't just look like you're just repeating what everybody else is doing. And this obviously draws into the real power of, you know, the trust. Influencers are trusted by their audiences, and if they start to behave in any kind of way that is seen or is interpreted as being inauthentic, you know, it turns them off straight away. And that's, so in a sense, when you're working with creators and influencers, you know, brands actually have, it's in the interest of the creator, and it's in the interest of the brand to essentially, you know, protect each other and to create messaging that works for that audience. And I think this is where the trust, you know, that trust, that bond between an influencer and their audience is actually essential, and it's the most powerful part of the if you like, the kind of the actual trade between brands, influencers, and their audiences. You know, in a sense, essentially the creator is allowing the brand access to that relationship and to that trust, and that is hugely valuable to brands. And I mean, the very best creators are the ones that can also bring their own unique spin to the execution and to the messaging, and that's very, very exciting. And also, you know, the part of the transaction that I think brands need to appreciate, you know, and really fully kind of optimize in terms of, you know, setting themselves free. I think platforms like TikTok are particularly interesting in how how the creators on TikTok work in terms of, you know, bringing that playfulness and that fun element to it. And I think that's something that, you know, once we get through this period of fear and anger, which I think is, you know, psychologically where we are right now as communities and society, and the fact that this is going to go on for a long time, you know, some of the younger people that I'm speaking to, particularly 16 to 24-year-olds, are essentially already kind of like, when's this going to end? How's this going to end? And I think that this is where, you know, we will see the evolution of far more interesting and playful entertainment provided by influencers and creators. And I, you know, I for one am encouraging, as for everyone at Takumi, is encouraging brands to think about that and how we can, you know, actually bring your brands to life in these unusual, seem unusual now, but this could be the new normal for the rest of the year. So I think it's really important that brands actually take, and I know that this is probably going to sound a bit controversial, like I said, but I think that this is a time to kind of realize there is an opportunity here. You know, we want to keep people in jobs and employed, and we want to keep the industry vibrant and alive. And to my mind, this is actually a hugely important time for creators, influencers, and the specialist agencies and operators who work in this space, because we can really be very proactive and help our clients to actually reconnect with their consumer, with their audience, you know, at this time. But influence has a purpose, and I think we can show you here some examples of campaigns that we've recently ran with regards to executing across all of the platforms and opening up the brief to all of our influencers. And these are some of the creatives that they came up with regard to the Who's Safe Hands campaign. And we also ourselves initiated something called the Mindful Movement, and that was on TikTok, and basically having fun and trying to get guys and girls, get our audiences to, engage with their influencers and think about how they can, use this time to relax, to pamper themselves, just to kind of chillax. And I think that these are kind of messages and creative executions that, can be turned around super fast. That's one of the things, as I said, I think was mentioned by Jane and others, that, one of the great things about influencer is that you, and the influencer creative, is that it can be turned around really super fast. And you can have lots and lots of different options, which I think is a great way of testing, learning and iterating for brands at this time. And so we also, I think, are seeing the rise of the new age COVID influencer. People still want to have reasons to smile and have fun, as I've said, but also, social media is, churning out, the COVID influencer. They're a new class of everyday influencer who are providing entertaining content. They're live streaming across Facebook, YouTube, Insta, and we're seeing, a huge surge in chefs teaching cooking classes on IGTV, teachers hosting classes on YouTube. And I think, obviously, as we mentioned, Mr. Wicks, who's bringing not just to the kids of the country, but to the mums, the dads, and the grandmas, and the granddads, and everybody else in between who want to kind of it's amazing, I think, how he has brought this hope. And also, as someone who, quite candidly, in fact, used to find him quite his upbeatness a little bit on the irritating side, I'm now actually, I've got to say, I want to put my arms around the guy and thank him for just bringing a smile to people's faces and some positivity into their front rooms, bedrooms, backyards, wherever they're actually doing the exercise. And I think that's incredibly important to, actually say that there's the cynicism that I have experienced in the industry over these years. I'm feeling is, we're now seeing this kind of genuine honesty and almost naive approach to things, which is lovely. And I think that's a really great transformative change, and something that I think we should be encouraging as much as we possibly can, because it is wonderful to think that we are actually re-identifying with our true selves. So to sum up, I think, there's been a lot of negativity around influencer in the past. Understandably, we're not going to get the greatest of press from, or greatest of coverage from some of the more traditional press. And I'm sure some of you probably saw my BBC interview where I had two extremely angry journalists talking to me about what qualifies people as influencers and how very dare they, which was very strange. But I think, I managed to bite it back and give influencers the big up that they all deserve, especially when they work very, very hard to do a great job. But I think that we do see and expect to see influencers grow post COVID-19.
Mary, thank you very much. That was really something else, and I think it's really nice where you talk about the creativity, the opportunity for us, and actually for a brand. The real creative people right now to execute content is the influencer. But again, to not be the tired messaging. The messaging is really important, but to bring creativity into that is really key. Do you think there's an opportunity for B2B with influencers?
Yeah, I mean, I think, in fact, we've actually been quite surprised at the amount of B2B client activity that we've actually started you know, there's a growth in B2B influencers, I think, is actually, and I think we'll see that continue. I think that's this period we will see people, especially anyone who's you know, I always describe creators as a mixture of mini entrepreneurs and you know, their own executive creative directors, which is a fabulous kind of combination. And if you're a specialist who specializes in, I don't know, financial services, or you know, who's maybe a former financial services consultant or whatever, I mean, you know, if you can grow an audience, you've got a business.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much. I think that's
Pleasure.
really powerful. Mary, I appreciate it. I'm interested